Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk About podcast, a series brought to you by Tallaght University Hospital with the support of the Adelaide Health Foundation. In this 6-part series, we're going to cover safer mobility and the various things that can affect our mobility as we age. In this first podcast series, let's talk about safer mobility and falls. Falls are a significant worry for older people. 1 in 3 people over the age of 65 will have a fall each year, and the risk increases with age. Over the course of the 6 episodes, I will speak with a number of colleagues at TUH who are experts in this area. We will talk about how we can improve mobility as we age, and how to reduce falls and injuries from falls, and if someone does fall, what we can do to help them. We hope this Let's Talk About podcast series will help older people, those who care for older people, and healthcare professionals develop a better understanding of falls prevention so people can stay active, keep moving, and enjoy life with confidence. Hello, my name is Paul McElwaine and I am a consultant geriatrician working in Tallaght University Hospital, and welcome to episode 2 of the Let's Talk About Safer Mobility podcast. In this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Ciara Norton, Senior Occupational Therapist, and Gillian Harte, Senior Physiotherapist.
Hello.
Today we are going to talk about the environment. Now, by environment, we're not delving into a discussion on climate change, but rather the environment of our homes and the space we frequently walk around. We will discuss how simple measures can make our home environment safer for ourselves and those we care for. We will also touch on the importance of our senses in reducing our risks from falls, in particular our eyes and ears. A recent national trauma report highlighted that half of all major trauma occurs at home, and predominantly from a low fall. That's a fall from less than 2 meters. I'm enthusiastic for this discussion today, as I know some very simple changes can make a real difference and prevent accidents from happening. So Ciara, to start with you, briefly describe the role of an occupational therapist, particularly in regard to mobility.
As occupational therapists, we mainly deal with people's daily activities. So this involves things like seeing how they get washed and dressed, how they can get to the toilet, how they make their meals, can they manage to get from room to room. So when we look at mobility, we're talking about functional mobility. It's the mobility you do in order to achieve the tasks that you need to do throughout the day.
Okay, so with your occupational therapist hat on, could you walk us through a typical home and maybe highlight the sort of high-risk areas or concerned areas?
To be honest, I could spend an awful lot of time talking about this, so I'm only going to delve into a couple of key areas. I suppose first off, I am going to, just as a couple of quick pointers, trying to make sure that you don't have mats or rugs around the house, or if you do, that you make sure that they're tacked down. If you have electrical cords, that they can be either pushed to the side or tacked into the wall, just so they're not trailing and getting in your way. Thinking about clutter as well in the house, so that you have free spaces in order to get from one room to the other, particularly those high traffic areas, so things like getting from the bedroom to the bathroom. Also thinking about your footwear, mainly trying to make sure that you have non-slip footwear, and that you have, particularly in terms of slippers, that you have shoes with a back on them. So not anything that is open at the back, particularly for going up and down the stairs, because that can make it quite risky.
So stilettos are a no?
Definitely a no.
Okay.
Talking about the stairs then, this is an area that people can use for storage an awful lot. So thinking about carrying items from one floor to the other, they tend to leave them on the stairs and leave them for later. Just making sure as much as possible that you don't do that, because they do create a trip hazard. About carpet then as well, just making sure that it is in place. By that I mean that it's not rolled up, that it's not worn, making sure that it's tacked down, possibly even removed if it is very old. Thinking about lighting then as well for the stairs, making sure that you can see, particularly at night, where you're going. It can also be a good idea to make sure that you have a light switch at the top and the bottom of the stairs, so that once you've done the journey up or down the stairs, you can switch the light off. Some people find it difficult to figure out where the top and the bottom of the stairs is. Marking the top and the bottom of the stairs can trigger your brain just to remember that you've come either to the top or the bottom, and just to be careful when you're coming off the stairs. Coloured tape can be a way to mark this very easily. For some people, a second stairwell can help with this, but try and do some of the other, make sure the other bits are in place first. But a stairwell can help.
Okay, so moving further up the house?
Sorry, I was just going to jump in there and just say as well, thinking about your walking aids, if you do have a stairs at home, you might need to have 2 walking aids. So for example, a Zimmer frame upstairs and one downstairs, so you don't have to carry them up the stairs.
Okay, that's very practical advice, actually. So you're at the upstairs now at this stage.
The 2 main areas upstairs would be the bathroom and the bedroom. Bathroom is an area where there can be spills. So just to make sure, particularly in a tiled area like this, that you wipe the spills up as quickly as possible. If you do use mats or rugs in the bathroom, ideally you'd remove them. If you really need to have them there, just make sure they're non-slip. Using non-slip mats in the shower or the bath as well is one way to make sure just that you don't slide, particularly with soap involved, and making sure that you do clean up any soap residue because that can get quite slippy over time. Also ensuring that you don't use a towel rack or the toilet roll dispenser as a rail. If you do need assistance to get up off the toilet, you actually need to install a rail there. From the bedroom point of view, a big thing is making sure that you can turn a light on, particularly overnight or in these dark mornings, that you have light when you need to get out of bed, making sure there's a lamp close to the bed that you can switch on. Thinking about bedclothes then as well, just making sure that they're not going to be trailing on the floor. I know we all like to pile blankets and everything over the winter, but just keep them up onto the bed that nothing comes down onto the floor. Sit down to dress as much as possible and being mindful of long trailing dressing gowns or night dresses, both in the bedroom and then particularly on the stairs, just to be mindful of those.
Okay, so I suppose worth highlighting at this point that if you are doing any adaptations in the home, particularly sort of safety ones, to get someone who knows what they're doing.
Yes, people mainly will use an occupational therapist or a community occupational therapist who works from the local health centre. You can access these if you have a medical card or if you have a long-term illness card. If you don't have either of those, they can also come out to the house and just give advice around where they think rails are maybe placed or what equipment you might need. If you need bigger adaptations, you can go with a grant. So there are a couple of options available for grants. This would mainly be for bigger adaptations, but they can also do rails along with that.
So I suppose that your environment at the home also takes in the outside. So I might bring this on to Gillian. I certainly get a lot of referrals where falls happen on the outside, particularly in relation to wheelie bins for some reason. But what would your advice be around the outside and mobility outside?
Yeah, we do see lots of wheelie bin problems. So for example, people running out to try and get there before the bin man comes, or not anticipating correctly what weight the bin is going to be. And walking outside in general, we do see a few problems or a few trip hazards to be aware of. So one of the particular ones to think about is thinking about your walking aid. You might need a walking stick inside, but that might not be doing the trick for you outside, and you might need something a little bit more supportive because outside is uneven, it has slopes, it has paving stones and all that kind of thing. So if you feel your walking aid isn't working for you, you might need to speak to a physiotherapist about what might be more appropriate. And then the next thing to think about is surfaces. So you might have uneven pavings, you might have curbs. Even in your own garden, you could have steps within the garden. If you need a rail, get a rail installed. And if the surface is creating a trip hazard, if there's, for example, a broken paving stone, get that fixed. And then the last thing to think about for your surface is it slippy? So things like leaves, ice, if it's wet, it might not be the greatest time to go outside and walk on it, and you might just need to ask for a little bit of help there.
Okay. And so would you see, we have obviously the mobility issues and, the need for aids, but would you often see people with difficulties with, say, their eyes and their ears coming in with falls and assessment for falls?
Yes, absolutely. And it's an area that's often forgotten about, I think, when we think about falls risk. So, for example, from a hearing point of view, people who have a problem with their hearing are 7 times more likely to fall. And if that problem is kind of moderate to severe, they have more than double the number of falls compared with someone who has normal hearing. So it's actually a really important thing to think about and get looked at.
Okay, and would that be your experience from the vision and eyesight point of view?
Definitely. I think a lot of people will perceive visual problems as being mainly to do with reading. And they think if they're not having trouble with reading, then they don't have a visual problem. But it's thinking overall about your day-to-day life. Are you starting to find it difficult maybe to manage your medications, to read either what's on the box or the actual tablet when you take it out? Are you finding it difficult to judge when you're pouring, let's say, the kettle, where the cup is, or are you finding that you're having to wipe up spillages after you make a cup of tea? Things like measuring ingredients when you're making a meal. Are you able to negotiate curbs and steps when you're outside? Can you track things in your visual field? So if something moves from left to right or vice versa, are you able to see where it's going? So thinking broadly, it may not just be a reading problem, but there may be issues with your vision that you're maybe not picking up on.
Okay. And so sometimes having issues with your eyes and ears, it's one, difficult to recognize, but two, also sometimes difficult to talk about. So what would your next step advice be? So if we start with you, Gillian, from the hearing side.
The first thing to think about is if you notice your loved one, you feel their hearing might not be what it once was, ask them about it and advise them to go to the GP or go to an audiologist to get it assessed. And one of the things that you might notice is, their TV seems a little bit louder than it would have been before, and that might be a cue to you that, their hearing might not be great. And then I suppose the thing to think about for people who are using hearing aids is if they do need them, they need to wear them all day long. A lot of people just put them on when they're going out of the house, and that can create a false risk then when they don't have them on. So if you need it all day.
So from the vision side of things, what would the next step be?
Often it's family members who might pick up on a visual issue. So they will go into a house and realise that the house is inappropriately lit, particularly on a bright day, that somebody is trying to compensate for the fact that they can't see that well. If you notice this, just talk to the person about it. And I suppose there are options available. If you need an eye test, there are two options in terms of getting it for free. If you are a medical card holder, or you can do it on the back of your PRSI contributions. So this would be the treatment benefit scheme.
Okay, very good. So for our listeners, what would your top tip or takeaway message be for today?
No pun intended, but keep an eye on your eyes and ears. So get them checked, keep an eye on them, and use a hearing aid or glasses as appropriate.
We'll add an audible groan to that pun afterwards. Okay, and Ciara, what would your top tip be?
Just in terms of the environment, that there's a lot of simple and easy tricks you can do just to make it that little bit, to reduce that risk in terms of maybe having a fall or a slip.
Brilliant. Okay, so thank you both of you for that excellent discussion today. Join us next time for episode 3 of the Let's Talk About podcast, when we will be discussing polypharmacy and falls, which I can assure you is not about having too many chemists in your area, but about people who are on lots of medications and how that, believe it or not, can contribute to falls. Thanks for listening, and let's talk again soon.